I'm Ed Curtis, and I'm going to be briefly covering the history of LGBT representation in the American film industry. Though many may assume that gay representation is a relatively newer feature in Hollywood's landscape, it's debatably as old as the medium itself, as shown in one of the first movies ever made, the Dixon experimental sound films. Produced in 1895, this short, featuring two men dancing, was, at the time, dubbed a shocking subversion of male behavior, so much so that the film earned the nickname The Gay Brothers. Not long after came the first same-sex kiss on film in the 1927 Best Picture winner, Wings. However, neither of these depictions were outright homosexual in nature, with some film historians arguing they showcased a more brotherly love than anything else. Many films of the early 20th century that chose to depict a gay character did so through what became known as the sissy archetype, a flamboyant, flowery pansy. Gay characters or activities were used as a source of comedic relief, typically by using drag, like in Charlie Chaplin's A Woman. But with the introduction of the Hays Code, the 1930s brought an even more harmful shift to how Hollywood could depict homosexuality. Under the Hays Code, it was forbidden to produce films depicting sexual perversions unless those acts were done by a villain. Since homosexuality was, at the time, classified as a sexual perversion, any gay character had to be either morally bankrupt or victims of their own sexual perversion. The most infamous example was Joel Cairo in the 1941 film The Maltese Falcon. Things began to change in the 1950s and 60s. As Hollywood strived to keep up with the popularity of European cinema and television, many filmmakers began using homosexual references to create sensationalism around their films. Unfortunately, any outright homosexuality usually ended in tragedy, such as with William Wyler's remake of The Children's Hour, starring Audrey Hepburn and Shirley MacLaine. One of the few exceptions was the 1962 film Lawrence of Arabia. In the picture, not only was Peter O'Toole's character heavily implied to be gay, it was also implied he had a relationship with Omar Sharif's Sharif Ali. Despite this, the film was incredibly successful and went on to win the Oscar for Best Picture. Following the Stonewall riots and the gay liberation movement of the late 60s, Hollywood began to see LGBT Americans as a potential audience and started making films more directed to them. The first of these, and arguably one of the most important films in LGBT history, was William Friedkin's The Boys in the Band. Presenting an honest look at what it meant to be gay, The Boys in the Band started the slow process of presenting LGBT characters in a more complex, realistic way. This would be continued with films like A Very Natural Thing, Something for Everyone, and Ode to Billy Joe. However, many films of the time continued to portray homosexuality as a disease, a portrayal worsened by the oncoming AIDS crisis. Despite outcry from Christian fundamentalists, the AIDS epidemic forced Americans to talk about homosexuality more honestly and gave birth to a new generation of LGBT filmmakers who rebuilt gay representation through what became known as New Queer Cinema. Big-name celebrities began portraying LGBT characters in more mainstream films, such as The Birdcage, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and To Wong Foo. But there was a catch. Though these films depicted decent gay relationships, they couldn't portray same-sex intimacy or sexuality and hope to be successful. That is, until the release of Ang Lee's 2005 Best Picture nominee, Brokeback Mountain. Unafraid to present homosexuality unfiltered, Brokeback Mountain became a huge film in LGBT history and helped lay the groundwork for more modern films such as Milk, Black Swan, and Moonlight. Although we currently live in a golden age of LGBT cinema, it's clear equal representation still has a long way to go. Genres like horror lack prominent LGBT representation, and the transgendered community still strives for a more honest representation in film. Despite this, I believe the next decade will continue to build on the groundwork established over the last 100 years, giving all members of the LGBT community the voice they deserve. After all, it gets better.